In this special feature from the Happiness in Their World podcast, Lord Geoffrey Dear, former Chief Constable, Inspector of Constabulary and member of the House of Lords, shares timeless wisdom on leadership, values, happiness and legacy. These are the moments that matter. Today I'm joined by a man who has lived at the sharp end of public service for over 6 decades. Lord Geoffrey Dear, former Chief Constable of the West Midlands Police, Assistant Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, His Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary, and a crossbench peer in the House of Lords. He's been described as one of the most respected police officers of his generation. From the Brixton riots to the aftermath of Hillsborough, from armed standoffs to reforming British policing from within, Lord Dear has not only witnessed history, he's shaped it. But today we ask a deeper question. What does happiness mean to someone who has carried such immense responsibility? Lord Dear, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Steve, it's a very great pleasure to see you again.
Having a purpose to get that job satisfaction is key.
Yeah, I knew you'd ask something about this, and I gave job satisfaction a fair bit of thought. And I think there are 4 things that might run as a thread through much of what we're going to talk about today. I think there are 4 factors you need in any work to get job satisfaction. First of all, the boss has to be known and identifiable. Now, in a very large organisation, that's difficult, and we could talk forever about how does the boss gain some sort of visibility. But from the people working within the organisation, the boss has to be something more than just a name on a sheet of paper, a name that you occasionally can bump into in the newspapers. It has to be something with a personality attached to it, however you manage to get to that position. So that's the first thing, a visible, recognisable boss. Secondly, what is the boss looking for today and this year and this month? Not in generality terms like, we're in the business of keeping the public safe. Of course, that's so in policing. But what are the specifics that we're trying to achieve this week, this month, whatever? And drill it down to detail. So visible boss and identifiable objectives. Thirdly, what do I, as part of the organisation, way down in the organisation perhaps, feel that I am doing to help achieve that? Maybe a very small cog in a very complex machine, but it doesn't matter if you know that what you're doing helps to get the boss to where he wants to go. So visible boss, an identifiable set of objectives, and what you're doing to get there. And probably most important of all, are you valued? Because if you feel valued, if you feel recognised, if you feel that you are part of the system and the system acknowledges that and you, then likely you will go home feeling that you've done a good job. If you're not rewarded, if you don't feel that you're part of the team, if you feel that you've been ignored, then likely you're going to be very unhappy. Was always spend 10 minutes every day with the cleaner. And what he meant in shorthand was you've got to talk to people who are doing the real work. Doesn't matter who they are, where they are, when they're doing it, get out and talk to them. And I took his advice and found it was hugely rewarding. 1 or 2 tricks of the trade. You don't always do it between 9 and 5. You do occasionally go out at funny hours and meet them. You always tell them you're coming. Otherwise they think you're snooping. You recognise that they are probably rather pleased to see you. They're also rather pleased to see the back of you. They don't want you around for too long. But the fact that you've bothered to go and you are talking to them on their ground. You've come out of your cave and you've gone into their cave, talking in their office or by the side of their car on a street corner or whatever it is. If you've bothered to do that, you will get the message of what it's really like at the sharp end. But what I would say is it does seem to me, looking at television and reading the newspapers and watching life generally, that leadership is in very short supply across the board.
Oh, yes.
Not only in police. I think we've got a society which is completely enmeshed in management. Management is all about schedules, it's about budgets, it's about timescales, it's about all that mechanical stuff, and is very important. and it's a science, somebody once said. Leadership, which is about engaging people's minds, engaging their will, they want to do or not to do certain things, is very much an art. And we're in a society where everything is measured. Everyone has a tick box approach to life. You get it because we're computer driven, I think. You pick the telephone up and go through to the gas board, and you know that the question you've got doesn't appear on the screen at the other end, and you're not going to get very far because the things that really count in life are not measurable. Things like humanity, things like applied common sense, things about judgment, all of those things which are so important and which are enmeshed in leadership, because they can't be measured, are not on the rubric of most people. And I think the police service is in the same boat. We are besotted with management and managers, and although the people at the top of any organisation, including the police, will tend to say, well, I'm at the top, so therefore I'm leading, they're actually not very often. They're very often just managing, and they're not inspiring and moving forward in the way that they could do. Yeah.
You've seen how fast social media and public attitudes can shift. Do you believe the pace of modern society has made life more difficult, or is it just simply different?
Oh, it's more difficult. Anyone who says that they want change to slow down or stop is trying to stop the tide. We have had change remorselessly since the world began. So the difficulty we all have in every nation is the speed of change. And the speed of change now is remorseless and very fast, particularly technological change.
AI, yeah.
And hanging on to that and trying to keep up with it for anyone is difficult. And it keeps changing the goalposts, as people sometimes say. If you change the goalposts for policing, of course, you're all over the place. And yet, society is being changed and itself is driving change, two things in place at the same time. It makes policing very difficult. What we have at the moment is people who are pursuing one particular viewpoint, who have, through social media as much as anything, who are able to make their views very vociferous and very loud. And that is something that has only come about in the last 20 or 30 years, I suppose. And it's easy to be sidetracked by that. How you balance that extremist, call it an extremist view, if you like, or minority view, how you balance that against the majority view is a balancing act for politicians and also for law enforcement. And it's not easy. Well, the big institutions, I think that we held out in my childhood and prior to that, certainly since the Second World War, the things we were really proud of, the health service, the new education system, the way in which the military was run, policing for sure, and so on, the church, all of those have declined in public acclaim, all of them. And that, I think, is due to the complexity of society itself, the way in which there was a deference within society. I don't mean a slavish adherence to class, but there was a mannerly society, which is not necessarily all seen today. So there was a structure there. And the challenges that have been thrown in the face of people in positions of influence or authority. When I was a young cop, you could walk down the street and you knew automatically that you had the majority of society was behind you. And if you said do something, they did it, usually without complaint. Try it now. Tell a group at 2 o'clock outside a club which is turning out, tell them to do something, and likely, if you're unlucky, you're upside down in the gutter, because the challenge to authority, whether it's the church, the parental system, the school, the police officer, the challenges are all there, and they weren't there 20, 30, 40 years ago. Oh, I think it's admirable, and I applaud what you're doing. I think the word happiness needs fleshing out. We all know when we're happy, you wag your tail and smile, and you're talking about something actually much more deep-rooted than that. And we might have touched upon this earlier on in the interview when we talked about job satisfaction and acknowledgement within the workplace and indeed at home. But in terms of do we need a work where people feel, a world, I should say, where people feel that they are recognised and valued, then yes, of course you should pursue that.
So if we imagine if schools measured emotional intelligence and creativity as seriously as they do test scores and exam results, would that change how people would grow in society?
And I think we have become bewitched, and we've touched on this before, bewitched with test scores,
Results driven.
results, and I think that needs harnessing and probably curbing. Education is all about, it seems to me, moulding somebody helpfully in a way that makes them bigger and better for society.
Should we track things like gross national happiness, the successful model that originated in Bhutan? Should we track this alongside gross domestic product to give governments a fuller picture of national well-being?
Well, you can certainly track the gross national product quite easily. At the moment, it's dire.
Yeah.
And it's dire because we know it's dire and
Yes.
we don't know what to do with it. If you can get a handle on how you measure happiness, then fine. And I would say yes. The problem is, of course, trying to measure it.
I think the big problem is nobody has asked the questions. Nobody has thought to set out the questions that need to be asked of the public. I can't recall a politician ever approaching me and saying, "What do we need to do to make your life happier?"
Or fulfill you.
More fulfilled. Those questions just simply don't get asked. And if the questions are not being asked, how can they possibly measure whether we are happy or not, other than the discontent?
Well, I suppose it comes back to almost what we were talking about with leadership and management. We are besotted with things you can measure. And you're talking about things that are very difficult to measure, and yet you know whether you're in an enriched or a barren sort of environment within society. You know it, you can see it, you can feel it, but you can't measure it.
Yeah.
And it's getting a handle on how do you measure it. Maybe you don't measure it. Maybe you just say to people, do you feel valued?
Yes.
Do you feel that your view is taken into account? The next generation of technology leaders seem to be congregating around the White House at the moment. And I'm not sure that that's a very good model. Harnessing the best things from technology is, of course, the trick, isn't it? And we've all seen people absolutely besotted with the phone in the middle of in the palm of their hand. I think it has led very rapidly to a society which is over-focused on self, over-focused on entitlement, over-focused on rights rather than responsibilities. I mean, the Greek philosophers, Aristotle in particular, always talked about if you're given a right, there is always a balancing responsibility to go with it, and we've forgotten the responsibilities very often, but we're completely bewitched with our rights. All of that can be driven the wrong way by technology, and I think at the moment probably is. What you do in the future, and to get the balance back in is a trick, which I hope is exercising politicians, but I'm not sure that it is. Without getting into the theological argument, I think one of the problems we've got in society is that the old religious, biblical, Ten Commandment type mantra, which everybody knew and responded to in one form or other, on the whole, have been diluted or brushed to one side. And my view, to answer your question, is that we need leadership, again, the same word, we need leadership from the top, whether it come from the church, from Parliament, royal family, the shakers and movers of society, to say these are the principles that we stand by. And I think those you call it moral compass, if you like. You could argue that I think society has probably lost all or part of its moral compass. It is now searching for a lead, searching for a set of standards that they can live by. And whether the society as a whole recognises that or it's happening subliminally, I don't know. But it does seem to me, with a horrible generalisation, that we are in a point in history where those certainties are not there, and society is wafting about left, right and centre because they're not there and not recognised. How you get them back? Tricky. Oh, I have a model for the House of Lords, which will never happen because prime ministers, when they're in opposition, talk about changing the House of Lords. As soon as they get in, they realise they've got patronage gifts, and they can fill the House of Lords up with people to whom they either owe money or owe favours, and nothing gets done. My model for the House of Lords would be that the power should still stay with the House of Commons, who are elected. The House of Lords should be a revising chamber, which it is now, acting a bit like the headmaster sending the homework back, 3 out of 10, try again. I mean, I jest at that point, but you're in that sort of
role
of trying to make things better. I would certainly have it all appointed, and not with parliamentary, with prime ministerial patronage. And of course, that's never going to happen. But my model would be outside appointment, House of Lords down to about 450, with the lifetime ticket taken away, and probably going to leave at the age of 70 or 75, which seems to be the retirement age for most other organisations. It would be a much tighter grouping of people who are there purely and simply for what is believed they can bring experientially from their past. Now, that won't happen. For political reasons, it's not going to happen, but that would be my model. What do I think about the current role? I think far too much of politics, and certainly the politics in the House of Commons, the criticisms can quite easily be tracked back to the fact that the people who join as an MP now tend to see politics as a career. Whereas before, not so long ago, most MPs had made a career doing something or other and been successful in it and have brought experience with them. And now the current crop of MPs, and for the last 15 years probably, have more and more been dominated, not entirely, but dominated by people with no experience of running anything. And yet they suddenly find themselves into positions of huge influence. Simultaneously to that, the civil service have been pushed to one side in favour of what people call SPADs, special advisors, something that Tony Blair brought in. And special advisors have eclipsed, to a large extent, the role of the civil servants. So you've lost two things simultaneously: experience from the MPs and the experience and the influence of the civil service. And so you get a very different political scene now, and it's not one with which I'm comfortable. And I think the discomfort with the general public of politicians generally can be tracked back, a lot of it can be tracked back to that position. I think the role modelling that used to go on, where you could look at either the leader of the parliamentary party who was in, or indeed the opposition. You might not agree with the opposition, but you could respect the people who were occupying those positions, has to a large extent been diluted. And it's been diluted because A, you don't know who they are. B, if you do know who they are, you don't much like the way they do it. And you don't like the way they do it because they're demonstrating very often their ineptitude to exercise that role. Now, that's a generalisation, but there's too much of those three things, I think, in play at the moment, and that leads people to saying we've got to have something different. And one last comment is that because life is so complicated and so complex, it's almost an impossible job to give anyone to say in a democratic system, how are you going to run the country? And I hear too often people almost banging the table. Sometimes they do bang the table, but almost metaphorically banging the table and saying, what we need is really good, firm government. Be careful, because that firm government thing brought in Stalin and Hitler and Mussolini and Franco and all the rest. I think what they're really saying is what we need is clear government. We don't want a set of politicians who promise one thing in the manifesto and then promptly tear it all up and go in a different direction. Who are doing U-turns, who don't know where they're going. They're buffeted they're affected by outside influences rather than driving change from
within.
From within. All of that is bad news. And all of that you will find right the way through the European system. I was on the European Select Committee for a long time in the House of Lords, and we looked outwardly away from this country into Europe as part of our brief. And you would find these criticisms in most of the big European countries, certainly the big established ones, Germany, France, the Netherlands, Sweden, all of those would be saying more or less what we're saying. Life is getting very complicated, and how you handle it needs a very deft set of politicians. Empire Windrush, I suppose, really. I championed the cause of one West Indian builder who'd got himself into a tangle with the Home Office and said, well, this is something I think I can help you with. Took him along to the Jamaican High Commission and suddenly found that the Empire Windrush was rumbling along, and the High Commissioner of Jamaica and all the other major islands in the West Indies or Caribbean were having the same problem. Lifted the lid, and we found that the again Theresa May policy was anti-Empire Windrush people, and so I stood back, having launched that particular ship, and watched it go, and the government climb down and give justice to people who had hitherto been capped off. I mean, that's something you look back on and smile and pat yourself on the back quietly and think, well, there was a big change there. And indeed, had we not done that, I do believe a lot of people would have been returned to the West Indies who had been believing themselves to be citizens of this country for a very long time. My West Indian builder had served on the jury. He'd done jury service. He was married to an English woman. He had a house, paid his rates and all the rest of it, and was being threatened with transportation back to the West Indies because of a flawed system in the Home Office. And to be able to stop it for one man and then lead on to, I don't know, thousands of others was something you feel rather pleased with.
The response that I got to the Ask the Boss question was just overwhelming in terms of the respect that they felt for you. And that, you know, to have created that level of respect, even some years after your departing from the West Midlands, I think was a legacy in itself.
Well, you were good enough to let me see some of the comments, and I felt very humble reading them. And it's nice to read them, and you smile and pat yourself on the back and all that. The things that were mentioned were what the boss said, and I saw him, and he said it was about personal contact, either with the individual or not. And that's about walking the course. That's about getting out and meeting people who are actually doing the job. And they're the things that they remember, rather than the fact that suddenly the uniforms were better and suddenly the cars started rather than couldn't get out of the yard because the battery was flat.
Absolutely.
It was all about the personal influence that one can have within an organisation. And I think that's a message for society as a whole. I think society as a whole is, I might have mentioned this to you before, is over preoccupied with the personality side of it. I'm entitled to this. I've got the rights for that. You see it in people taking selfies of themselves. They're no longer taking a picture of the viewer; they're taking themselves.
Sense of entitlement. Yeah.
It's you see it in lots of small things. In life generally, where people are over preoccupied with themselves and not enough thought given, it seems to me, in the environment and the groupings around them. And so, without wanting to go backwards in time, because you can never go back and capture it, there was something in society a few years back where people did think more in a mannerly sense about people around them. And I think we've lost some of that in society. And it makes society a much more difficult, friction-prone entity. If we thought more about other people and the impact we have on other people in general, both domestic life and work life as well, life would go on in a smoother and a more enjoyable fashion. And how we get back to that, whether it is to do with the decline of established religions, I don't know. Interestingly, the big established religions, like the Muslim faith, the Sikh faith, Buddhism even, still manage to keep their societies together in a much more cohesive way than we do from the Christian ethic. And that might be a comment that I've just made, which is a criticism of the way the church has run itself over the last 20 or 30, 40 years. Without preaching a gospel in every sense of the word, looking back, there was in society a certainty that certain things were done and certain things were not done or said. And I think we perhaps lost some of that.
Yes. What would make you feel hopeful about the world your grandchildren are inheriting?
I think the world is a confused and dangerous place.
Yes.
The certainty we had as a child was that Russia might drop a bomb on us. The atom bomb then became the hydrogen bomb, and you got this huge standoff between America and Russia. And yes, our parents were fearful of what would happen if the bomb dropped. But there was a certainty, and you could look in one direction, which was towards Russia. And are they going to do it? Maybe they won't. And slowly that disappeared. I'm oversimplifying, but at least there was one place that you could, or one threat that slowly disappeared. Nowadays, I think because of the way the world has changed and the way politicians have changed and what has happened in America and what is happening in the Ukraine, all of that has made the uncertainty in the world much greater than it was before. You can pick up a handful of countries, more than a handful, who pose one sort of threat or another, military, economic, ethnic, in a way that never happened 30, 40, 50 years ago. And it makes society a much more tenuous place to be. And therefore, I duck the question only in the sense that I don't know what's going to happen, except that I'm somewhat confused and somewhat concerned.
Yeah, well, I'll conclude then just by saying, Lord dear, having served under your command in the 1980s, it's been a real privilege to sit down with you today. I know I'm not speaking just for myself. On behalf of the countless officers, staff and colleagues who had the honour of serving with you, thank you. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your unwavering belief in the importance of integrity, compassion and public service. And most of all, thank you for reminding us that true leadership leaves a lasting mark, not just on organisations, but on the people within them. It's been a pleasure, sir.
It's been my pleasure and a privilege. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Follow the Global Happiness Crusade for more conversations that matter. Click the links below this video to learn more. We'll see you in the next episode of Happiness in Their World. Our free podcast series, Happiness in Their World, isn't about celebrity. Instead, it gives voice to resilience, hope and human wisdom. In our first episodes, you'll hear from a war hero who rebuilt his life after catastrophic injury and loss, a member of the House of Lords and a former Chief Constable who led through national crisis, a celebrated author shaped by her struggles, and a disaster response commander who's seen humanity at its most fragile and its most fierce. These stories aren't always easy to hear, but they're real, and they reveal the truth that happiness isn't the absence of hardship, it's the triumph of the human spirit over it.